Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest was introduced to me by the Drunkalogs' other official fairy godmother, Fielding Edlow. He is a very funny stand-up comic and television writer who made his late-night debut on Jimmy Fallon and was selected for the New Faces showcase at Just for Laughs. I just watched him do a taping for Comedy Central where he shared a certain brand of midlife bewilderment to which I could all too easily relate. Won't you please welcome Andy Haynes. How long did you live here?
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, I came out and I'd done a little bit. I'd done the late Fallon show.
Right.
And I'd done Montreal and I was like getting a little bit of traction, and then I got like a shitty writing job. You know, like writing for Ridiculousness,
right.
Like a non-union job.
Right.
And then I got a half hour, and I got a good writing job. I got like a guild sitcom job. And
what show was that?
It was called Ground Floor.
Uh-huh.
And then got divorced the first year on Ground Floor, and then the second year I got sober. And the second I got sober, it was just like no more writing jobs, no more stand-up. I think that's a normal thing with like getting sober. You gotta like
start over again. Yeah,
and like all this shit that you've been like dealing, like just pushing underneath, like, you know, at that point I hadn't drank for like 4 years, but I'd been smoking weed like it was like my job. Like I was like,
right.
I could not stop smoking weed. And so I got sober. I lost everything. Like I didn't have a partner. I didn't have a job. I couldn't get stand-up dates, and really dug into my program. Got like some nice things back, but they weren't like exactly what I wanted. Still, like pulled back on my program, lost all those things, and then by that point I hadn't worked. I still haven't worked on a guild show since 2014, but and I was trying so hard. And nothing was working. I was super resentful. And my mom had gotten breast cancer. She's fine. But I was like, okay, well, I had a bad situation with a roommate. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get rid of this apartment. I'm going to go to Seattle, take care of my mom for an indefinite amount of time, and then like reassess everything. But first I had a trip planned to New York. And I went out there. It was super fun. My friend had like this room that's like probably the size of like that door if you made like a box right here, so like very tiny.
New York size bedroom, big enough for a bed.
Yeah, but I mean smaller than anything I'd even lived in. And
right.
And then I worked at this moving company when I was like, 28.
What company?
Called Intense
Movers. I don't even know why I ask a question like that. I'm gonna know. I don't know.
I mean, they're kind of well known in New York because, and also they're kind of known in show business because like a lot of comics have worked for them.
Stuff,
yeah,
right.
Like if you go to comedy venues and you're hanging out with comics that have lived in New York and you're like, oh, I used to move in New York, they'd be like, did you work for that moving company?
Right.
And it was just like total surrender. It was like one of those moments where I was like, okay, I used to like have a parking spot on the Warner Brothers lot with my name on it.
Oh, man.
And now I live in like a shoebox and I'm a mover again. And it was like the best decision I ever made.
Let's do the thing.
Okay.
How it was, what happened, how it is now. Andy Haynes, yeah?
Yeah, like the underwear, but with a Y.
With a Y. It's a Y front Haynes.
Yeah, sometimes people will hit me with the Andy Haynes. Like I've gotten that a couple times.
Do people who say that, they must not know what heinous means?
No. It's like a, like a very bad open mic.
Right.
Or like a doctor's office. And not a good one. Yeah, so I was...
Where are you from?
I'm from Seattle.
Oh, nice.
And I grew up in kind of a tumultuous home. Like, mom definitely drank a lot when I was young, but it was, the real stuff that went on was that my parents got split up. My dad was kind of like a disassociative.
When was that? Like
Age 5, right. 1987. Right. And then I got diddled by a babysitter. Those were two things. And I got
How old were you when that happened?
I was probably 9.
Right.
But I was in a body cast because I'd broken my femur. So it was like kind of like, I can't tell if the trauma was like the body cast because I don't really like think it wasn't like I got like penetrated.
Right.
But it was just like childhood got like interrupted by like 2 significant things. And then I had this mom that was like, basically my mom had a nervous breakdown when my parents split up.
Right.
She'd had postpartum depression after I was born. And then my dad couldn't deal with it and left her. And then my mom just like never recovered from that. And it was just me and my mom. And she's super depressed all my life.
Wow.
She's like a mope.
That's a lot to a kid.
And I don't know why, but I always felt awkward. I mean, I always just felt a little off. I always felt in trouble. I always felt kind of oscillating between like either being like super introverted and kind of like like tight and kind of like not confident, and then it would be the other side, which was just like getting in trouble, running around wild, right. Careless. I was like a problematic child. You know, I got in trouble a lot. And
how'd you end up in the body cast?
I'd broken my femur.
Oh, right.
And I should have. I was a really competitive skier all of my childhood, teen, early 20s. But this was just playing with some friends, and a kid ran across the field behind me and chased me, and I slipped, and my leg just went like literally this way, and just like boop.
And I guess they put you in traction for that, right?
Yeah, I was in traction for 2 weeks, and then I was like in basically a cast from my nipples to my toes.
Wow.
And that was like 2 months, and I became like a hypochondriac and stuff. But you know, like all of that stuff, like I'm probably still an alcoholic with the parents being different and without getting molested and without having the broken leg. Like it's probably in there somehow. I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but it feels like it probably would have happened. Because I know a lot of people with great families that are drunks.
Totally.
But yeah, I chased trouble. I chased the excitement of trouble. Like I loved the attention of getting in trouble, causing a ruckus, breaking stuff. When I like got into my teens, I got into like skating, graffiti, and I hung out with some really bad kids. Like lots of car prowling, lots of shoplifting, lots of fighting, defamation of property. And then eventually, you know, my mom was never very like in control because she was kind of in her own shit. And I found weed at like age 12 or 13. And I don't remember really loving weed. And I don't even really remember loving booze the first couple times I had it. But then I remember significantly like in high school, that's such a different environment, high school versus middle school. And I remember my freshman year was like a nightmare. And then my sophomore year, I just like things kind of lined up where I got to hang out with the upperclassmen and I got to like go to parties. And I remember this one night, a kid gave me a 40 and I just drank it. And all of a sudden I was like the life of the party. I was the coolest guy at the party. Everybody wanted to like, not necessarily talk with me, but like they wanted to like hang out and see what I was willing to do. And girls were like flirting with me. Like, and like, you know, when you're 15 and you haven't like gone through that growth spurt and then like, there's a like 18-year-old girl that's like flirting with you. It's like the equivalent of like when you're 20 and a 35-year-old woman, like it was just like, I was like, what is happening? And, it was just off to the races after that. And I'd actually had like a moment earlier that year where I drank some 40s with some kids in a park and I blacked out and like I'd gotten like hit by a car, pissed my pants and threw up in like the lobby of a movie theater and I got taken home by the ambulance.
Wow.
And nobody was like, oh, Andy's an alcoholic. They were just like, Andy, you can never do that again.
Right. Well, I guess it seems to everyone like an anomaly.
Yeah,
at that
like
point.
well, you know, kids don't know how to drink.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I had a pretty normal high school after that. Drinking was a personality, and I got in a lot of hairy situations, but probably because of like socioeconomics and just the right kind of scenarios, I was able to navigate it. And I hung out with like, you know, a good group of kids that were upwardly mobile and went to a really good school and had a good experience, but never discipline, you know?
Right.
Discipline was something I chased. It was like when I got to my senior year and it was time to apply to colleges, I was the one that was like, I did all my applications. I researched FAFSA. I, you know, asked my parents for money for SAT tutoring.
Right.
And then
was your dad around at this point?
He was around until I was 10, and then he moved to the East Coast.
Right.
He was never not like in my life.
Right.
He never ever like didn't answer the call or didn't send he was a great dad in a lot of senses, but he was the child of a horrible alcoholic.
Right.
And his mother died of esophageal cancer from drinking, which is like a pretty hard feat to drink so much that it corrodes your throat.
Right.
She was like, you know, something out of like the Maltese Falcon, like hanging out in like a chase in like a, you know, like a silk robe, just drunk at 11 in the morning. And
did he get the gene?
He didn't.
Right.
I mean, my sister loves to be like, I think Dad has a drinking problem because he'll have like 4 beers a night.
Right.
But I've seen him like drunk like twice in my life.
Yeah.
I think he's got other things, but he doesn't seem to have alcoholism. And
so you have a sister too.
I do.
How old is she? Older or younger?
40.
Right.
And doesn't have a drinking problem.
And so did she have an effect on your like teen years, your childhood?
She took off when I was like 13. She was like a queer activist and just like kind of did that like weird like,
I'm done with y'all.
Done with y'all, but like, you know, black jeans, working in like activism, riding trains. Like she wasn't like a crusty punk, but she like, you know, like the type of people like when when you go to like a protest, like a real protest, and you see the people that show up that are like the real protesters, like they made the sign, they're like, they got the whistles and all that stuff. She was that, and she did that for a long time, and then she kind of burnt out on that. But when I graduated from high school, I'd been accepted to a couple good schools, and I said, I'm going to go be a professional skier. Nobody said no. My dad said, if you go to school, I'll pay for your rent.
Right.
So I went to school at night, and I moved to Lake Tahoe, and
wow.
I worked on the mountain at Squaw Valley, and you know, just lived fucking in the middle of the woods in a cabin with 4 other 18-year-olds or somewhere near that.
Right.
And just drank, you know, just like we didn't have anything to do at night. We couldn't get into bars.
Right.
Everybody else was 24, and we would just drink.
How did you find those guys? Through
skiing.
Right.
And that was like the first time that I really was like, oh, wait, this isn't normal. It's not normal to wake up like not remembering how you got home or not remembering like what happened in a scenario where you were like in a pushing match with some guy at a house, or, you know, just like those things started happening. How did you get home? Like there's 6 feet of snow. And then I went home for a little while, and it just drinking kept on ramping up. And I was always chasing the freedom of like a pure drunk, exciting, wild night. I loved the idea of like hooking up with a chick, and just like, you know, the 1 to 10 odds that it was going to go well kept me going.
Yeah.
And then that next year I started to get into some legal trouble. I flipped a minivan going like 80 miles an hour in the mountains, got a DUI, came back to Tahoe, got a like a disorderly conduct or some drunken charge, like 2 months after my DUI.
Ugh.
And then I like kind of got together take a break from drinking, went back to Seattle, had got accepted to college. And then like right when I got back to college, blackout, arrested.
Sure. Where'd you go to college?
Western Washington University. And then that was the next couple of years. It was just like every 6 months.
And what were you arrested for? Just like drunken disorderly, basically?
Just always like, you know, like one time I got beat up at a party. So I went back with all my friends and I like threw a hammer through the window. I don't remember it, but like it was a bay window.
Right.
Like one time I slashed all the tires at a house because like same thing. Like, and like, it's so terrifying because that means that I like walked to a house with a knife, you know, like, and who fucking knows? But, I quit after my last arrest and it was my senior year or something. No, it was like my fourth of 5 years of college. And I'd always would pop into a meeting because it was like, yeah, because it was that the thing was that I knew I was an alcoholic. I mean, you can't get arrested 5 times in 2 years and be like, this is a phase.
And how had you like court ordered AA?
No, I never got a nudge from the judge. I always did it preemptively.
How did you find out about it even? Like, how did you know that this was a thing that you could do? I mean, I knew about it, but there was so much stigma around it that I never like even tried.
I think I was probably interested in it. Right. Like, because zeitgeist wise, like you saw AA in like movies or and then also
how old are you now?
37. You know, you like down the street from my house growing up, there'd be a church and there'd be like, you know, 20 guys outside smoking cigarettes and you're like, what is that?
Yeah, I guess that always made me feel like I'm never doing that, whatever that is. That seems sad and desperate to me, and I don't want to be a part of it.
I think I always kind of had an attraction to like, you know, like I think Fight Club resonated with me so much. Some people were like, they loved the revolution. I think like I loved the idea of like this guy like moonlighting as like a victim. And all these like self-help groups.
Interesting.
But I had a girlfriend at that point and she was like, you gotta stop, man. Like you're gonna, and she was long distance. She was like my first love kind of thing. And so I gave it up. No AA. Realistically, you know, I just did it. To like, I'd go like once or twice. And then I quit drinking. I think I smoked.
What did you think of meetings back then?
Oh man, it didn't click. I remember a couple like times in Tahoe going to a meeting and being like, oh, that kind of makes sense. But like then like not really being serious about quitting. And then the other meetings I would go to, like the meetings in my college town were like literally like old fishermen and Native Americans.
Yeah, like how can I relate to this?
And I could barely understand. Like it would literally be like a guy would be like, I was down on the sea and the drink got me and and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like I'm not this. And then so I quit drinking and everything was fine. And then I did this weird thing like 2 years later. I started taking like sips of alcohol.
But you stayed sober for 2 years without meetings or anything.
Yeah. Well, I smoked weed.
Yeah.
But I didn't drink. I knew it was so clearly obvious that I had a drinking problem.
And did weed feel like a better solution for those years? Was it manageable?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it was bad. I mean, like sometimes like I would like eat like, you know, a fucking box of cookies and like
I still do that.
Feel sick. Or I would just do something dumb, you know, but it was like weed, you know, like you never like wake up after smoking too much weed and like you punched somebody and like crashed a car. It's like, it's always just so benign. But I started like drinking just like very little amounts. And I would go to a party and I somehow did it for like a couple years. I'd have a beer. I'd have 2 beers, you know, like I never really fucked that up. And then I started stand up. I moved to New York.
How'd the stand up thing start?
I was really upset about the Iraq War and George Bush's reelection. And I wanted to do some kind of activism, and activists were boring and unfunny. And I was thinking of different ways to get into activism. And then I watched a Bill Hicks special, and he's like talking about George Bush 1, and he's talking about Iraq 1. And I was like,
interesting.
And I'd been a summer camp counselor for years and years and years. Always had wanted to be a performer of some sort, but didn't really like I said, didn't have the discipline or like the nudge.
Did you do any performing in college or high school or anything? I mean, at summer camp, I suppose you
At summer camp, I was always on stage.
Right.
And
amazing.
I really think
there's no stakes.
Yeah. And the kids love, anything. Actually, I was always doing stuff like way too cerebral. And they'd be like, what? But that was like where I got my sea legs for performing. And then I really wanted to be a filmmaker and things like that. But I just went to an open mic and people were bad. And I was like, oh, well, if that's the stakes, like if you just got to be bad to get on stage, like I can be bad.
Where was the first open mic? Do you remember?
It was called Giggles, and it was in Seattle. And that club is now called Laughs. But I'm still kind of like holding it together very, very minorly, smoking a ton of weed. And then I just had like I broke up with a really sweet girl. I cheated on her while drinking. And things were kind of ramping up again.
Are you in New York at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what brought you to New York? Sorry.
Just stand-up.
Just stand-up. Like you were like, oh, I want to go there to do more stand-up, or was there some sort of opportunity? Or
it was just I moved to D.C. I met a bunch of really cool young comics. I had an amazing time there. I was like pretty in control. I mean, weed was definitely a big part of my story at that point, but like I sold weed then. And I just was like, I was having the time of my life, and stand-up was great. And then I met this girl in Seattle, and my friend was like, hey, there's an apartment in New York. You want it? And I was like, yes. And I go to New York, and I blow up the relationship. It's 2 years in, but I blow up the relationship through some drunkenness, and I drink for a couple months. And then it was just like, I don't know why, but it was like I had just had a couple months of feeling pathetic drinking and feeling like it just wasn't working. And I just quit. It was really weird. I just quit drinking. And that's the last drink I've ever had, was like May 17th. And you know what really, like...
What year?
2010.
2010. So that was 9 years ago. Or
yeah, but I wasn't sober yet. I still...
Oh, right.
I still
was
the last
smoking, drink, though.
Yeah, I still smoking weed and like doing mushrooms. But I quit drinking that like May 17th, and like a week later I got
You know what? My sobriety date is May 17th.
Oh,
how
weird.
about that?
That's random.
That's weird.
Some kismet. But I don't really consider that my sobriety date. But after that week, I got a manager at a big Hollywood agency.
What place?
Mosaic.
Right. Wow.
And then like
big fancy place.
Yeah. And then like 2 weeks later I got JFL.
How did the manager come about? I mean, were they just seeing you doing stand-up?
Yeah, I was just like running in a circle of like up and comers.
Who was in that circle?
Rory Scovel, Seton Smith. I mean, like I was a little ahead of her at this point, but like Kate Berlant was there, Aparna Nancherla, Hampton Yount. And then in New York, I had like Dan St. Germain, Mark Norman, Mike Racine, Sam Morrell, Annie Letterman, Nick Turner. I mean, I could probably go down the list.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know if it's interesting or
nobody's
not.
Nobody's sober. Nobody else is sober. I'm the only one.
I bet there are people who
Dan
are
St.
in that
Germain's
crowd
sober
now. Anyway. So you get a manager, and you get JFL,
and I get Fallon.
Huge. Wow.
In 1 month of quitting drinking.
So there's a sign.
And I was like, okay, like let's go. And anyways, long story short, I do those things and they're good. And then
how is Fallon? Just like just pure voyeuristic?
Just magical.
I don't think I've asked anyone this question. I don't know if I've had anyone on the show who's had a good big late night set.
Yeah, it was amazing. It was like out of body.
Did it go well?
Yeah. That's amazing. Cool. The Roots were like right next to me. And then, you know, like, it's so weird because I don't really have a low bottom. Like, I was doing pretty good.
Your bottom is Fallon.
That wasn't even my bottom.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. But it's like, you know, like a month before that, you're like, I gotta hang this up. And then it's like, boom, shit happens.
Yeah, it was so cool. And I mean, I don't think that was, maybe it was because I wasn't really smoking pot. Like, I got to the point of smoking pot and I wasn't really like indulging in everything that I'd done by then. But anyways, like
you know, there's that whole thing of like, one of the like truisms that they say in AA is like, first it's fun, then it's fun with trouble, and then it's just trouble. And it sounds like you had a shit ton of trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it was just like, drinking was very obviously, you know, the saying like, belly full of booze with a head full of AA.
Right.
Like, that's just like, I knew, like, after you get arrested 6 times, like, you can't lie to yourself.
Right.
And, like, the shit that I got away with. I mean, like, I flipped a minivan going 80 miles an hour.
Right.
Into a patch of trees in the snow.
That's amazing.
No seatbelt on. And I was literally unscathed.
Were you the only one in the car?
No, my friend Crystal was in the car and she was fine. She had a seatbelt on.
Oh, God.
But, like, you know, like...
God.
Like, last week I held her baby.
Right.
You know? Like, that's...
Yeah.
It's insane that I didn't, you know, like, and I'd forgotten the gravity of that miracle.
Sure.
But it actually, like, it's funny because that's like the first time that it's really landed with me that I held her baby and that the guilt I used to kind of carry around about almost killing her. But So
what happens then?
It's funny because, you know, it's like, this isn't a normal story of getting sober. It's like, I'd quit drinking and things were going pretty well. And I just knew it was just, the jig was up with drinking. It had become completely rote and like not fun.
Right.
And I was kind of like playing around with different things. And this was the first time that next spring I'd been like smoking pot on and off. It wasn't a big part of my story.
Right.
I'd probably done mushrooms once, never done anything else.
Right.
And a friend who's like one of my closest friends now in the program worked for this moving company that I picked up shifts at. And what am I saying? Picked up shifts at that time it was my entire job.
So you've got huge management. You've done Fallon. I just think it's interesting, and like you're still working at a moving company.
Yeah. And I mean, to put this in context, I still work at a moving company, and I have more television. I was on TV 4 times this summer, and I'm still working in a moving company. If you want to know the state of the show business success,
That's wild. Yeah. Anyway,
I'm also, I also fucked up with money, right. But I tried AA. For like that.
At that point.
Yeah, at that summer.
What brought you? Because you had a friend who was just.
And he was like, I was like, oh, I don't drink. And then he was like, do you think you have a problem? And I was like, yeah. Like, I can't drink. And then he was like, well, you got to quit smoking weed. Right. And I was like, yeah, I'll try. I don't need weed. And then I went to meetings for like 3 months. Nobody asked to sponsor me. It was really weird. It was like, because now when I look at newcomers, it's like everybody is like, hey, what's up, buddy?
Right.
I didn't get that treatment. And I thought it was so bizarre. But, and then I just smoked weed one day and I had like the time of my life.
Right.
And like, it's like, was painting a house with a friend. We got really stoned. We painted the house all day. I went and did a set. I had so much fun. And I was like, oh, this.
Dude, this is nice.
And then the next 4 years, that's all I did.
Right.
Just smoked weed every day. Smoked as much weed as I could. Got married. Stoned. Recorded a half-hour Comedy Central special. Stoned. Recorded a Conan. Stoned. Got writing jobs. Stoned. Like, just got stoned all the fucking time.
And do you look back on all those experiences and think, oh, maybe they would have been better, more sustaining, more successful had you not been stoned? Or was it sort of like...
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if anything could be different, because I don't know if you take away the aspect of my stonerness that it would have been, like, I just don't know if I would have had the same charisma or
Sure.
sense of humor. Because, like, you know, it's like they say...
So it's kind of working.
Yeah,
I mean,
weed works until it doesn't, or
Right.
something like that.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
everything works until it doesn't.
Yeah.
But, and, you know, like, my story of sobriety is really just like, okay, I have no spiritual connection. I have no self-esteem. I have no this. So, okay, first it's alcoholism. Okay, so it's alcohol. It doesn't work anymore. Okay, what's it going to be? Oh, okay, it's going to be comedy. So comedy. Okay, well then I need weed. Okay, so it's weed. Okay, weed's going to work. Okay, take weed out. Okay, women. Okay, women will make you feel good. All right, women. No, that's not going to work. Okay, credit cards. Have you tried credit cards? And then, long story short is I got really good things in my life and I was unhappy and I was smoking weed nonstop and I couldn't stop. And, you know, I caught myself sitting in a writer's room fantasizing about faking my death so that I could leave. Like every day, just sitting there and going like, I can go park my car in the PCH. I'll walk down to the beach. I'll leave something there so that it'll look like I walked into the ocean, and then I'll walk down the beach to Mexico.
Right.
You know, and I'll leave all of this behind. And this is like, I'm making 6 figures a year.
Right.
My comedy, I can still like headline any club I want to in the country. I have my own, you know, shit's great.
Like life is good. You're getting everything.
But I just knew then, and a friend said that he was going to meetings, and I went to a meeting, and I still smoked weed, but I was like, yeah, this is it. Like the jig is finally up. Like it's finally up. I cannot do drugs and alcohol. And I think maybe 2 weeks later, I went up to San Francisco. I slept with this married woman all weekend. Like we got stoned and just had like really gratuitous sex, and it was great. And then I was like, all right, sober. I went out on a very high note. But I was like, oh, I don't want to be the kind of guy that would sleep with someone's wife.
Right.
And, you know, because I've always felt a little bit like there's been like my drug addict side is like he's like a creepy, conniving, shortcut taking, you know, like I'm a crook. You know,
yeah.
like I'll
yeah, totally.
Like if I find some money, like I'm gonna try to find out who it belongs to now, but like my heart wants to just be like, yeah,
right.
You know,
yeah, it's mine.
And my story of sobriety is a lot of will. It was, like I said, the jig was up, and it's taken me a long time to get this thing. I'm almost 5 years. I'll be 5 years next month. And
since you stopped smoking weed.
Since I stopped smoking weed, stopped doing anything.
Yeah.
And it's basically like been this cycle of doing my program well, being serious about it, getting back a life I want, taking my program for granted, and then losing all those things, and then going, oh yeah, I got to do my program, and then getting them back and losing them again when my ego steps up. And that was like this last January, I found myself just apoplectic after losing a job and a very wrong for me girlfriend that I really wanted to work because she was the shape and image of what I thought I needed.
Yeah.
And I just really did the thing that I had to do, which was double down on my program. And it had been multiple sponsors and multiple geographics and lots of, you know, banging my head against the wall. But I kind of finally realized like what this whole thing is for me. And it's like, I have to give it up. Like I can be ambitious, but I'm not like a power broker. Like I'm never going to be able to like be the guy who's like, I saw the opportunity. I walked into the room and I demanded it. Like, it's just, that's not me. I'm not that guy. Like, I don't, it's never ever worked for me.
So you've tried to be that guy.
Yeah, I would love to be that guy. I would love to be the dude that was like, walked into some fucking studio exec's office and I was like, listen, baby, if you don't buy the script, somebody else will. So you can feel like an asshole today or down the line. You know, like, I've never, ever been able to do that. And I have to turn it over and go, okay, what's the next logical thing in my life that I can do that makes sense, you know? Oh, okay, well, for instance, like January, I don't have any income. I'm $30,000 in credit debt. I have lost this really great job. What do I do? Well, I still work for the moving company. I guess I do that full time. Okay. Right. What else do I do? Well, I don't want to do this forever. I'm almost 40 years old and I don't want to be a mover in 3 years. All right. Take a class on copywriting. Okay. What do I do next? I got to put together a portfolio, I guess. Okay. What else do I do? Work really hard at comedy and treat that like a job. That's all I can do. And if I do those things, it's been a long time since I was like the star of the show. Right. You know, it's been 5 years since I was staffed on a show. It's been 5 years since I've done a late night set. But my life is good. Actually, it's been 6 years since I've done a late night set. And, you know, like now I live in New York. I try to go to a meeting every day. I have 2 sponsees. One is kind of out, but it's due to a serious injury and it's, you know, we're working through it. So, I mean, right. I have 2 sponsees. I have a sponsor here and I'm not great, but I try to be pretty good and I try to balance everything. And it's a lot of phone calls, fellowship, step work, and not beating myself up for not being perfect. And then just doing the next logical thing. And usually that means like praying in the morning and night, calling people when I'm upset, and just doing the work, you know? So like now it's, and this is like the thing about like alcoholism is like, or for me, is that like, so I was like all fucked up. I'm never going to work again. I'm going to be a 40-year-old loser if I don't figure this out immediately. And then like I took a class on copywriting, which told me how to write a portfolio. And then I put a portfolio together and then I talked to a few mentors. These are all very logical things to do. This is not like nobody gave me the secret. Right. And it's like how business works. Yeah, yeah. And then I like put it out there and now I make some of my living doing copywriting, freelance copywriting. I'm trying to get back into writing for television because that's what I love doing. Yeah, yeah. And then with stand-up, it's just like, I try hard at stand-up. And there's no like, I don't have any cheats. I don't have any, it's just that my brain wants to cheat and I don't get to cheat. Like all I get to do is work hard and the results are pretty good. Yeah, yeah, and you don't control what happens. Take a lot of humble pie. Like at the diner, I have humble pie constantly. Let me ask you something. How do you define your higher power? Like, what does that look like? What do you have a relationship with a higher power? Like, obviously, you say you pray. Like, I don't know. I pray and meditate. I don't meditate enough, but my higher power has never really been super defined to me. At points in my life, I've said it was comedy because it just made sense that that's been the longest leading narrative in my story. But I've never really tried to define it. I've done a bunch of those steps or those like workshops with sponsors where it's like, write out a letter to your higher power or like define what your ideal higher power is. And that never really like sticks in my head. I definitely like would say that for me, I have such a strong will that my higher power has always been this idea that I'm not in charge and it's just like a trust fall situation. I am trust falling into oblivion and I know that somebody's going to catch me because I've constantly been caught. So that's all I can do. I can trust fall. I have to give it up. So whoever that is and whatever that is, and like, I really like, whatever, like it could literally be anything. And I definitely believe in like karma and energy and like, you know, like I couldn't really define it. I'm like, I studied religion in college. That was my major. But I just know that like my stupid brain doesn't know how to do this stuff. And so I pray I do the 3rd and 7th step and the set aside prayer. And I basically have to pray to get out of myself.
7th step is remove these defects?
Yes.
Yeah.
And set aside is like new experience.
Right.
Sometimes I do St. Francis. I've really kind of like oscillated between a bunch. But it's just that, like, you know, I'm not gonna ask for the right things.
Yeah.
And so
that's great.
And so I literally have to ask for, you know, take away my will,
right.
Take away myself, and, you know, make me useful to somebody. And like a lot of times my prayers sound like this, like, God, I really want this job. I really, really want this job. But I know that that's not the deal. So just make me useful. You know, right. I want it to be useful in this context, but just make me useful. And like, you know, earlier this year, I had some real, like, when I broke up with this woman, it was really hard for me.
Right.
And it had nothing to do with love. Right. It had to do with my will. And it had to do with that she was the shape, and she was like the woman that was going to make me right. She was an architect and in the arts, and she dressed well, and she knew artists and filmmakers right. and all these people. And
if I can live in that orbit, I'll be fine. She was
from Australia, right. And like every dinner was like, you know, in a dim lit restaurant, and we were sitting there for hours laughing about like intellectual shit. And I was like, finally, this is the life I want. This is the life I want, yeah. You know? And I also, you know, I loved her. Right. But I had it was probably the hardest thing that I've ever gone through in sobriety, which was, and I think it was love addiction. And it was right. like my friend, the same friend that got me into the rooms originally, he said to me, he goes, well, maybe you gotta go to SLA because, like, you know, you just go where you're bleeding, is what he said. He said, right. Go where you're bleeding.
Good advice.
So I did some SLA work, and I don't practice that program, but I was like, yep, like, that is it. That is what's going on here. So,
well, it's that squirrel again. Like, it's gonna fucking, like, now I don't have the job or the shiny show business stuff that's gonna prop me up. So now it's like just this human being is right. the epitomization of my ego. Right. And literally, you know, for like 2-3 weeks, I had to pray every day, like, God, please, like, let this pass. Like, right. Let me calm down. Let me stop right. obsessing over this. And it was like, you know, it was like mental health stuff. Like, I literally like would wake up and I would be like, I would wake up and I'd be like, okay, what's this about? Like, what's going on? And then I would remember her existence, and my brain would just repeat her name over and over and over again. And my heart rate would like start shooting up, and I was just like, I'm fucked up. Right. And I didn't go out, luckily, and I didn't, but like, you know, like I think that like that's what long-term sobriety is. It's like this, you know, like you have to get to the bottom. You have to get to that squirrel. Yeah. You know, like that squirrel totally. Is like the whole fucking thing. And like even now, like I don't know if I've ever shared in a meeting and felt like I like knew what I was talking about, or right. like felt like I got a message across, like nothing cohesive. I just know that like I'm just trying at this thing and shit's pretty good, you know? Like right, it's like right. I've never been that guy. Like I have some friends in show business, and they did all this work their entire youth to prepare for these moments, and then they walk into a room and they're like ebullient and charming, and like they can like, you know, they're like famous people now. Right. And they just like do it. And you know, God, that would have been great. It had those things lined up for me. I know I'm like a talented guy and I have some things to offer, but I can't lament those things anymore. I just have to do like the next best thing. And I'm like, you know, that's like not every day. Some days I'm like, see somebody who it really bothers me that they get to be as successful as they are, you know, like, and I say that I think she'll completely understand. It's hard sometimes, like that my ex-wife, like, she got to never have to be a manual laborer again, you know, like she got to still be like, she had some dark times. I don't really know everything she went through, but like she got to be like, you know, kind of like
reevaluate her life and then like have some success again.
Yeah.
You know? And everybody's going to have that. Like, you know, you'll go to a meeting sometimes in LA and you'll see somebody where you're like, oh, fucking shit, you're sober?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I was just listening to you on my radio. But that, you know, that was like another thing that was huge for me was that like, and still, this is like the biggest like wrestling. Like I say this to myself all the fucking time in LA or sorry, in New York is like, I don't care about being happy or a good person. Like I want to be rich. Like I don't want to be like kind and like, you know, like the honest guy. Like I want a townhouse in the West Village. I want like, you know, like all Rocher Beaubois furniture. You know, like I want, right. You know, like I want people to. I don't like honest, good, hardworking. No, I want and like people.
I'll be those things once I'm rich.
Yeah, and then also people will be like, well, you know, they're so unhappy. Like with my ex-girlfriend, she was like a complete drunk. She lied and she was deceptive and all these things. And like when I was going through it, I would like talk to somebody and they'd be like, but you know what, Andy? Like do you know how much that like tortures her inside? And I was like, who fucking cares? She's got a 2-bedroom apartment, you know?
Right.
Like, I don't give a fuck. Like I'm tormented right now and I'm the good guy.
And I'm broke.
Yeah.
So
that was like another thing that I had to like kind of peel away was like, okay, like you think your higher power a lot of days is like image and money.
Yeah.
And things like that. And so it's just all these things are things that I have to reconcile and hope that I work better at and hope that I, you know, and it's like, you know, like I'm sure as a sober person, you know this, it's like a lot of times you aren't good.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times and you have a kid, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's like, I would love to have a kid. And if I have a kid, that will be so great because it'll mean that like I kept a woman around more than 9 months. And, or I don't know,
right.
Long enough to
conceive
and keep a child. But, you know, like I'm sure that I will fuck up as a parent and like
yeah, I mean you fuck up a lot and then you know you have these like horrifying thoughts about life's meaning and more about life's meaninglessness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know you have those thoughts in the face of this like innocence and joy and like the dissonance between sometimes what's going on inside of me and what I see in my children is so it's so acute that it's really painful that like I am so much more aware of how hard life is than they are and like
oh yeah
my fear of how they're going to be able to bridge the divide between you know childhood and adulthood and just like what it takes to sustain a reasonably sane adulthood, you know, especially if you don't get a lot of luck and breaks and stuff. I mean, it just scares the hell out of me. And then, you know, then sometimes I articulate these thoughts and everyone's like, that's just you projecting your own shit onto your kids. And I'm like, oh, you're right. I should just fucking relax.
Yeah, because, like, I mean, from my point of view, it's like you got this beautiful home and, like, this life that I kind of idealize. And then, like, I'm sure that, like, you know, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, of course. Like, there's all kinds of, yeah, it always looks that way. I mean, everyone's life looks better to me than my own. I
fantasize constantly. I fantasize about, like middle management at, like, a company that, like, distributes chai tea. And I live in Santa Clarita in like a cul-de-sac. And my wife is like, you know, just the sweetest woman in the world. We're so fucking boring. I'm just like, I'm excited to like ride bikes and like go play like intramural sports.
Right.
Like, and it's so normal. Like, I'm just that. I'm just like, I'm like Santa Clarita. And, you know, like, my life's amazing.
Right.
But I fantasize that normalcy. And, like, though, you know, most people are like, I'd kill myself if I was that guy. You know?
Totally. And you probably would. You would never get there. I mean, how do you get there from here? Like, I mean, it's like, it's not going to happen.
I mean, I would basically have to, like, pull, like, a Don Draper and just, like, be like, oh, like, I was abroad for 15 years. And they're like, your name's really Andy Haynes. And I'm like, no, Carl.
We saw this thing on YouTube. No, it's not me.
That is not me. Yeah.
I guess it's harder today to pull a Don Draper than it used to be.
The internet ruins everything. I'm take the wrong point from that. I'm like, the internet ruins everything. Back in my father's day, you could take the identity. You could take the identity of a dead man and
make a life for yourself.
Yeah, make a name for yourself in the ad world.
I think it's in some ways like the horror of sobriety too is that, like, you know, peace is something that you actually have to work at every day. And it's not like you get to a place where you graduate and you're done. It's like that journey to serenity is it's never ending. It's never ending.
Yeah, I think the other day I was in a meeting in New York and the leader of the meeting was a rabbi.
Right.
And he had, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 years of sobriety. And he said, I wake up every morning an agnostic. And I thought that was like so, it's probably like the best thing I've heard in AA in years, which is like, this guy whose life is dedicated to religion and God and has long-term sobriety still wakes up and doesn't have it figured out,
right?
Then that is really hopeful.
Yeah.
Like, you don't need, I think there's like, you know, when people like start talking about the miracle of AA, that's the type of stuff where it's like, I don't know how these like drunk businessmen in 1930s America came up with like a system and a program that allowed for that kind of space. Like, that's where the miracle seems like to me, which is that, like, you don't have to know. You don't have to be sober. You don't have to stay sober. It's like, there's no penalty. The whole idea is like, we are trying to get to that serenity and you are going to fuck up a lot. And like, there's all these mechanisms set up for you to deal with that.
Yeah.
And it's like, works.
Yeah, and I guess when I say it's the horror of sobriety, but really I'm fine with it. Like,
it's horrible.
I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I mean, like because, you know, the thing is, I guess often in sobriety I do connect with that serenity, and then I am more happy and more ecstatic and more high than I ever was from mushrooms or alcohol. And I don't pay any penalty for it, you know?
Yeah.
So anyway, Andy, this feels like an end.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Forever, so.
That was cool. I really appreciate you coming.
I appreciate it.
All right. Awesome. Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs. The Drunkalogs cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogs theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.